Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I hope everybody's having a good week. And you're all ready to snuggle up for the evening and watch the snowfall. And then you can get up real late tomorrow and worry about getting out of your driveway. That's what I'm going to do. Well, I want to continue with a series of talks that I've been having with you over the last few times that I've spoken. You'll recall a few weeks ago I talked to you about outreach and about Rabbi Stuart Dauerman's approach and how he had these four pistons on his engine of outreach. Last time we talked, it was about our relationship with God, sharing that relationship, meaning sharing our story, our experience of God with others. Today, I want to talk to you about the second one of his spokes, which he called the doxological motive. Actually, all it means is worship. That worship is a way of outreach. And maybe one of the most important of all. That learning to worship the Lord with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength is the power of the good news. Because in it, everything else flows out of it. Let me just say it that way. Everything else flows out of my rejoicing in my relationship with God. Not only having that relationship, but rejoicing in it. Having a joy that emanates from it, that others see. It's tangible. And so what we have to do is to recognize that worshiping God will be so powerful a witness to anyone around you, that if we exude that joy. And besides, it's going to be one of our vocations in the world to come, worshiping God. All you have to do is read the end of Zechariah or any of those other things, and you will recognize that we are preparing for a great wedding feast. And are we getting prepared in this life, or are we allowing other things to get in the way, to impede our ability to worship the Lord? In that portion that was just read for us from the deliverance of God at the Red Sea, I chose not to focus on the song at the sea. That's easy, you know what I mean? It's this song of praise and everything. But I wanted to direct your attention to this first reaction, just before they sing the song at the sea, which begins in chapter 15 of Shemot. We read this, you'll see it up there. It said, when Israel saw the great power which the Lord had used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord. They believed in the Lord and his servant Moses. And then immediately after that, they begin singing the song at the sea. Miriam gets up and she leads the people in dancing and singing before the Lord. When we worship, it's this visible thing. And worship should not merely be Shabbat morning, nor should it be necessarily in the privacy of my prayer closet. But worshiping God becomes an attitude, a way of life, a way of being, of seeing the world through the eyes of my love for God. And so I wanted us to share an example of precisely this, I think, a beautiful example, but it's not found in this portion that we read today. It's actually found in 2 Samuel chapter 6. Now, if you're familiar with those portions of the story, let me give you the background to this. Now, prior to this event, years actually before, the Philistines had come and conquered Israel. Had conquered Israel and had stolen the Ark of the Covenant. They had taken the Ark of the Covenant back to their homeland. And of course, God didn't like that very much and made them have all kinds of evil problems. They had some digestive issues, let me put it that way, okay? They had a bunch of digestive issues. And so David was able to conquer those people when he became king, and he wanted to deliver the ark back to the Mishkan. Well, on the way, you may remember the familiar story. They're transporting the ark in a cart. Bad move. Transporting the ark in a cart, and the cart hit a bump, and the ark began to tip over, to fall over onto the ground. And a man named Uzzah tried to help out. He grabbed it and tried to lift the ark back on, and he was struck dead. It was terrible. He was only trying to help, but he did it wrong. In fact, they all made a terrible mistake because God had given them a prescription about how to carry the ark. Well, David was so upset, he left the ark in the home of a gentleman whose name is escaping me at the moment. Anybody remember? Can't remember. But now they were delivering it back to David. Finally decided that the ark had to come back to the land. And so he's in chapter 6, he has made the appropriate arrangements, because you see, when you're dealing with worship of God, it should be done right. You know, there is a right thing. It's not just anything goes. But when we do it right, it's a joyful thing. And so, the man's name is Nachon. God left it there. Okay, so here's what's happening now. The Ark of the Covenant is, actually, it was Obed-Edom. That's the man's name. Obed-Edom. Right. I want to get these people right. Okay, so now David wants to bring the ark back to the Mishkan, back to Jerusalem. So let me just read a little bit of this before we continue with our discussion. It says, "Now it was told King David that the Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom, all that belongs to him on account of the ark of God. David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness." And here's this beautiful phrase that, you know, I saw some pictures of it. I should have gotten one of the pictures because it's just a beautiful scene. It says in verse 13 and following, it says, "And so it was that when the bearers of the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed an ox and a fatling, and David was dancing before the Lord with all his might." I can only imagine, he's the king of Israel, and dancing before the Lord with everything that he has, and he does not care who is looking or watching. It says he was wearing just an ephod, which is like an undershirt kind of a garment. That's all he's wearing. And he doesn't care, because he's there before his God with every ounce of joy that he can muster. And I'm thinking, man, Lord, just loose me like that. Don't you want to be loosed like that in your worship of God? Where it's just you and him in that moment together, in that moment of ecstasy, where we can just let all of our stuff go. All the things that, you know, I have to maintain my dignity. I have to maintain my status. I have to worry about who's looking. Just once. Just once. Say, "Lord, here I am. There's nobody here but you and me." He worshiped with all of his might. This gentleman here was a worship leader of a big church community all over the country, by the way. I mean, they have campuses all over the United States. he says this about worship. He said, but just as your body needs sleep, your soul needs time to rest in God, to learn more about him, to talk to him, to worship and praise him, to fellowship with other brothers and sisters. Worship is necessary for our very lives. It's part of our nourishment, just like food. Just like food might be. How much, everybody knows I'm a chef. I like to cook. So I spend a lot of time cooking. Then you eat it in 50, it takes you 4 hours and then you eat it in 15 minutes, But how much time do we take to really get together with God? To just enjoy the presence of the Lord so that it permeates our being, that we walk in it all day long. And there's very little that can wind up disturbing it. You know what I'm saying? That's what we need. It will defeat all the darkness in our souls if we allow ourselves to be let loose like this. He danced before the Lord with all of his might, everything that was in him. And one time, Lord, one time. So, it's out of that overflow that we can give to other people what we have. If you have so little in your own reservoir of that joy, how can you share it with others? You know what I'm saying? That's why we have to make it flow out of ourselves by letting ourselves go before God. Really giving all of our heart to him. In the letter of Hebrews, it says, therefore, since we have received a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us show our gratitude by which we may offer God an acceptable service with reverence and awe. For our God is a consuming fire. Oh Lord, consume us, Lord, as we open our hearts to you. Consume us. Take our hearts and our souls. Deliver us to your presence, O God, so that we can worship you with spirit and truth. So I say each service we attend should be a celebration. Not just, hey, oh no, I have to drag myself here. But that even, no matter how many of us are here or not here, with all of our mights we shout to the Lord. The fewer that we are, the louder our voices should be. And if we do that, God will fill this place. The Holy One, we just pray that we will shout to the Lord with all the joy in our heart. It says in the book of Deuteronomy, when God commands us to celebrate the feasts, he says this, 7 days shall you celebrate a feast to the Lord your God in the place which the Lord chooses. Because the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce and in all the work of your hands, so that you will be altogether joyful. He commands us to be joyful. He commands us to worship him. Let's do it with all of our might, just like David, dancing with all of his might. I just wish I could have been there to see it. Maybe for once I'd have got up and danced with him. Goes on to say in this portion, David's desire to worship the Lord resulted in his desire to bless other people. When we're this joyful, when we have this kind of thing in our heart, then we want to share it. So in verse 18 it says, when David finished offering the burnt offering and the peace offering, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. Further, he distributed to all the people, all the multitude of Israel, both men and women, a cake of bread and one of dates and of raisins to each one. He was willing to share. I'm having problems even expressing it. It's something bubbles up out of his heart that makes him want to do good things for others. Oh, how much does the world need this? And out of the abundance of our joy, we're willing to give of ourselves to others. This is a testimony that cannot be denied by anybody. You see? So when we're willing to share the joy of worship with others, they will be drawn to the Lord. He fed the people. We can feed others with our worship. I want to share this next quotation. This is from G.K. Chesterton. Some of you may know that name, famous pastor of the 19th century. He said this. He said, "We're perishing for lack of wonder, not for lack of wonders." What does that mean? You know, God does marvelous things. Look what he did at the Red Sea. No wonder we sang and danced. And how many miracles has God done for us in our own lives? Can we share these? It's not, you see, the world is, we don't lack wonders to share with people. We lack wonder. In other words, the awe that we feel when we're in the presence of the Lord. But when we have that, we have wonders to share. You know, over the years that I've been involved here at Simchat and around the Messianic Jewish community, I have seen so many ridiculously crazy, wonderful things that have happened for people. I mean, healings, deliverances, all kinds of stuff that just defy, logic. We need to share them. We need to share them with each other because there is no lack of God's wonders in this world. They are everywhere to be seen. And that's what we need to share. It's just joy and peace and life. The kingdom is everywhere. We just need to share that kingdom instead of just, hiding it in our little rooms wherever we are and, sharing it with just ourselves. It's like talking to yourself. We need to share that with a world that needs wonders right now. It needs to know that God is active in the world, making things happen for good, not for evil. I always tell this story about not understanding the wonder of God. And some of you probably have heard this story before because, after all, I've been doing this for so long, I'd probably repeat myself. But I love telling this story because it really humbles me about worship. So when I was growing up, I lived in a housing project, Bronx, okay? Now, it's this big building, and there's lots of families, and everybody is close together, all right? I live in a house right now. I can't hear my neighbors. It doesn't matter what happens, I can't hear them. But in those days, we were all on top of each other, and you could hear everybody through the walls, okay? And I wasn't the nicest. I was a nice guy. I just was like a trouble, got into trouble. And didn't like getting up early, particularly like on Sunday morning, because Saturday night was usually, we had something going on. And there was a family that lived underneath us. It was a Hispanic family who were part of a Pentecostal church somewhere in town. Not that I ever cared about any of that sort of thing. But there was one thing that was very peculiar about these folks. They loved worshiping God all the time. And when I say all the time, I mean all the time. They had guitars or whatever else, other instruments they had in their home, and they would play music at all hours. And so 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning, all of a sudden they're warming up for church, okay? And I'm telling you, they are blasting, singing these songs and, and guitars playing. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so I would open my window. I would literally do this. I would open the window in my bedroom, and I'd get like a long string with like with a rock or something, whatever I could find, and I'd be swinging it to bang it on the window. Or we had those old, steam radiators, and I would shake them until I tore the thing out of the wall, anything to make them stop. And when I look back on that now, I say to myself, I was squashing the spirit in those people. I mean, okay, we could have negotiated about the hour maybe, but why should I have been interfering with their joy, what they thought was something they could share and worship with God because they loved it so much? I wouldn't do that again. I mean, I'd still negotiate about the time. I absolutely would. I would. I'm not a morning person. But what they were doing, I so appreciate it now. That they cared so much about worshiping God, that they didn't stop they just do it at church, so to say. That they brought that worship right into their home and their family. It was part of the warp and woof of their lives. That's what we need. Because you see here, David runs into a little problem, and we'll run into it too. It says here, in verse 20, it says, when David returned to bless his household, Michal, the daughter of Shaul, came out to meet David and said, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today. He uncovered himself today in the eyes of his servants and his maids as one of the foolish ones shamelessly uncovers himself. People will mock us because, just like I mocked those folks, for their desire to praise the Lord, to be joyful in the Lord all the time. People will mock us. So what? So what? We have what they do not have, but can have if they choose. What I should have been doing was saying, hey, what key are you playing that song in? And jumped in there with it, instead of mocking. We will be mocked, but don't let that stop you. We need to be worshipers of God. Pray with people. Listen, when you're out there and somebody has a problem, pray with them. When you're out there with somebody who needs a hug, hug them. When you're out there with somebody whose heart is broken, share with them the love of God so that they can be repaired. And there's no lack of opportunity. We live in a target-rich environment, people. A target-rich environment. So, let's see, one last thing. This quote from Timothy Keller, who's, I'm running into all the time these days for some reason. He said this about worship. God directs his people not simply to worship, but to sing his praises before the nations. We're not called simply to communicate the gospel to non-believers. We must also intentionally celebrate the gospel. Celebrate the gospel before them. That's what worship is about. Celebrating the gospel. I was thinking about the portion that Michael was describing today when he was doing his summary. And he talked about how when the Amalekites attacked, Moses raised his hands. And when Moses raised his hands, the Israelites were victorious over the Amalekites. It was only when his hands were lowered that they began to be defeated. And I was thinking, as Michael was saying that, I was saying, what's that all about? It's about worship. We raise our hands before the Lord, and our victory is assured. Our victory is assured. Let's raise our hands to the Lord. Lift our hands high and shout to the Lord gloriously. When you read 2 Samuel chapter 6, you also have to read First Chronicles. I forget what chapter it is. But in First Chronicles, it has a corresponding event. But it adds more details to it to help you understand what was going on. And one of the things that happened as part of the celebration of bringing the ark back to the Mishkan in Jerusalem was that David ordered the priesthood to write a song for the occasion. And the song that they wrote, the sons of Asaph wrote the song that we now call Psalm 96. And I'd just like to read a portion of Psalm 96 for us together. It says, ascribe to the Lord, O families of the peoples. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory of his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Worship the Lord in holy attire. Tremble before him, all the earth. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Indeed, the world is firmly established. It will not be moved. He will judge the people with equity. Let the heavens be glad and let the earth rejoice. Let the sea roar and all it contains. Let the field exult and all that is in it. And when we do that, here's what happens. Then all the trees of the forest will sing. All the trees, every soul will sing joyfully before the Lord. When we worship, the world will one day join us in worship together. And if you haven't figured it out, read the end of the book of Revelation. You find out that's exactly what happens. All the earth will sing. So now I'm going to ask you to stand with me and sing a song. Okay? So, in the Shabbat Sukkah de Zimra, in the songs of praise on Shabbat, toward the very end, right after, actually, the song at the sea, we sing a song that we all have a rendition of, and hopefully my slides will work. I sure hope they will. This song is called Nishmat Kol Chai, this prayer. So I want us to sing this song with all of our heart as we sing to all the glory of God as we end our sermon today. So let's see if this will work. Should start. Soul of every living thing shall bless your name. The spirit of mortal flesh extol your fame. God of the first and of the last, forever the same. Sleeping, you guard us from harm, to awaken your people from slumber and free us when we are bound. You enable the speechless to thank you, and you straighten all those bowing down. Supporter and help of the falling, all honor to the soul of every living thing bless your name. The spirit of mortal flesh extol your faith. God of the first and of the last, forever the same. You ransom and rescue us, deliver and save. For our mouths filled with song as the ocean, and our melodies countless as waves. For our lips filled with pure adoration, we still could not praise you well. With our hands spread in prayer like the eagles, and our feet running swift as gazelles, we would yet be unable to thank you, Redeemer of Israel. The soul of every living thing shall bless your name. The spirit of mortal flesh extol your name. God of the first and of the last, forever the same. You ransom and rescue us, deliver and save. Our spirit, our soul, and our bodies, with our about our tongue, we will worship and praise and exalt you, O everlasting One. With our words we confess that we serve you. With our deeds we proclaim you our King. May our lives be as incense before you, a sweet smelling offering. The soul of every living thing shall bless your name. The spirit of mortal flesh extol your fame. God of the first and of the last, forever the same. You ransom and rescue us, deliver and save. You ransom and rescue us, deliver and save. Amen. Lord, we bless you and thank you, because when we worship you in this way, all the trees of the forest will sing for joy. Bless you, O God, and may we bless others through our joy in worshiping you. And let us all say, Amen.